At first glance, Squid Game opens with an image that feels almost harmless. Children running barefoot on a dusty field, laughter echoing under the afternoon sun, chalk lines roughly drawn on the ground. The game they play is simple, physical, and deeply familiar, a ritual of childhood where victory is fleeting and loss carries no real consequence. In this moment, competition is innocent. It is about pride, about energy that has nowhere else to go, about the pure joy of play. No one is thinking about money. No one is thinking about survival. No one is thinking about what it costs to lose. This opening is not nostalgia for its own sake. It is a deliberate setup, a calm surface placed above something far darker. Squid Game uses childhood not as comfort but as contrast. The series understands that the most disturbing stories are not born from violence alone, but from the corruption of things that were once pure. By beginning with a children's game, the show quietly plants its central question. What happens when innocence is stripped away, repackaged, and sold back to us as entertainment? As the story moves forward in time, the game returns. But everything surrounding it has changed. The laughter is gone. The field is replaced by controlled spaces, painted walls, and silent observers. The rules are still familiar, but the meaning behind them is not. In this new version, losing no longer bruises the ego. Losing erases existence. What was once a test of agility becomes a test of obedience, fear, and psychological endurance. The game itself has not grown cruel. The world around it has. This is where Squid Game reveals its sharpest insight. The series does not argue that people are naturally violent or immoral. Instead, it suggests that systems built on desperation will inevitably turn even the most ordinary activities into instruments of harm. Childhood games become tools because they are universal. Everyone understands them. Everyone remembers them. That familiarity lowers resistance, making it easier to step forward, to believe that survival might still be possible if one simply plays well enough. The innocence of the game is therefore not a lie. It is a memory, and memories are powerful motivators. They remind players of a time before debt, before failure, before shame. By anchoring its violence in nostalgia, Squid Game exposes how deeply modern society exploits longing. The desire to return to a simpler past becomes fuel, pushing people to accept conditions they would otherwise reject. The game feels fair because it feels familiar, even when it is anything but. Importantly, Squid Game does not sensationalize this transformation. The show avoids glorifying the violence or framing it as spectacle. Instead, it allows the horror to emerge naturally from recognition. Viewers are disturbed not because the rules are complex or sadistic, but because they are painfully simple. Everyone knows how to play. Everyone knows what is at stake. The tension comes from watching people realize, too late, that fairness means nothing when the system itself is designed to consume them. The opening of Squid Game also establishes a moral ambiguity that defines the entire series. No one is forced into the game at the beginning. Participation is framed as choice. Yet that choice is offered only after every other door has been closed. The series suggests that freedom, when paired with desperation, becomes a carefully crafted illusion. Saying yes does not mean consent in its purest form. It means surrendering to a reality where survival feels like the only remaining option. By grounding its story in a children's game, Squid Game strips away excuses. There are no complex ideologies, no abstract enemies, no distant battlefields. There are only people, rules, and consequences. This simplicity is what gives the series its universal power. It does not belong to one country, one culture, or one economic system. It speaks to a shared experience of competition in a world where the price of losing keeps rising. In this sense, the opening of Squid Game is not merely an introduction. It is a thesis. It tells the audience exactly what kind of story they are about to witness. This is not a tale about monsters hiding behind masks. It is about ordinary people navigating a world that has quietly transformed play into punishment and survival into entertainment. The innocent game was never truly innocent, because the society surrounding it had already decided what losing would mean. Seong Gi enters the story not as a hero, but as a man quietly collapsing under the weight of his own life. He is not introduced through strength, intelligence, or ambition, but through failure that has become routine. His mornings begin with excuses, his days drift without direction, and his nights end in regret. Gi-hun is the kind of person society stops noticing, not because he is invisible, but because he has fallen into a category that feels familiar and uncomfortable. He is a reminder of what happens when effort no longer guarantees reward and hope becomes something you postpone rather than pursue. What makes Gi-hun compelling is not that he is uniquely unfortunate, but that he is painfully ordinary. He is divorced, burdened by debt, and emotionally stuck between wanting to be a good son and a good father while failing at both. He loves his daughter sincerely, yet cannot provide stability. He cares for his mother deeply, yet depends on her more than he should. These contradictions define him. Gi-hun is not cruel or selfish by nature, but he is irresponsible in ways that feel human rather than malicious. His life is a series of small losses that, over time, have taught him to expect disappointment as the natural outcome of effort. The series carefully avoids portraying Gi-hun as a caricature of failure. His gambling addiction, for example, is not framed as reckless, thrill-seeking, but as misplaced hope. Each bet is less about greed and more about the belief that one lucky moment could erase years of mistakes. Gi-hun does not gamble because he loves risk. He gambles because he believes chance is kinder than reality. In a world where systems have repeatedly failed him, randomness feels fairer than structure. This mindset is crucial to understanding why he later accepts the invitation to play the game. Gi-hun's moral compass, though damaged, is not broken. Throughout the early episodes, the story makes it clear that he still possesses empathy, even when he lacks discipline. He shows kindness to strangers, shares food without expecting repayment, and reacts visibly to the suffering of others. These moments are not heroic gestures. They are instincts. Gi-hun does not calculate generosity. He defaults to it, even when it costs him. Ironically, this lingering humanity is what makes him ill-suited for the world he inhabits, a world that increasingly rewards detachment over compassion. The tragedy of Gi-hun lies in the gap between his intentions and his outcomes. He wants to be better, but he does not know how to escape the cycle that traps him. Society offers him no clear path forward, only reminders of his inadequacy. Debt collectors reduce his existence to numbers. Employers see him as expendable. Even family relationships become negotiations shaped by money rather than trust. Over time, Gi-hun internalizes the idea that he has already failed the roles assigned to him. When the story begins, he is not afraid of losing because, in many ways, he believes he already has. This is why Gi-hun's decision to enter the game feels tragically logical. He does not step into danger chasing glory or dominance. He steps forward because the alternative is a slow erosion of dignity. The game offers something his real life no longer does: clarity. The rules are simple. The reward is defined. The cost, though terrifying, is honest. In contrast, the outside world demands endless endurance without promising relief. For Gi-hun, the game is not an escape from morality, but an escape from uncertainty. Seong Gi represents a type of loss that modern society often ignores. He is not defeated by a single catastrophic event, but by accumulation. Small setbacks pile up until standing still feels safer than moving forward. Squid Game understands that people like Gi do not fall into despair dramatically. They drift there, gradually, until risk feels like the only remaining form of agency. By the time Gi enters the arena, he is not chasing victory. He is searching for proof that his life still has weight. In that sense, before the first game even begins, Seong Gi is already a man who has lost. The invitation arrives without spectacle. There is no dramatic music, no ominous warning, no visible threat. It appears instead in one of the most ordinary places imaginable: a subway station, a space defined by routine, fatigue, and indifference. People pass by without looking at one another, each absorbed in their own survival. Into this environment steps a well-dressed stranger, calm, polite, and unsettling precisely because he does not belong. He speaks softly, smiles easily, and offers a game. At first, the interaction feels almost absurd. A small contest involving folded paper, a childish challenge paired with light humiliation. Win, and you receive money. Lose, and you accept a slap. The simplicity of the exchange disarms suspicion. There is no contract, no obligation, no immediate danger. It feels voluntary, and that is exactly the point. The invitation is designed not to threaten, but to test. It measures how far a person is willing to go when dignity has already been worn thin by life. For Seong Gi, this moment is deceptively significant. He does not hesitate because the game is appealing. He hesitates because it feels familiar. Being laughed at, underestimated, physically corrected by the world around him is nothing new. The slap does not shock him as much as it should, because humiliation has become part of his daily existence. In that sense, the invitation does not introduce violence into his life. It merely reframes the violence he already endures into something transactional, something that at least comes with compensation. What makes this invitation disturbing is not its content, but its framing. The stranger does not coerce. He does not chase. He does not explain. He offers a choice and waits. This waiting is critical. It places responsibility squarely on the individual. If you accept, it is because you chose to. If you refuse, the world remains unchanged. The game understands that true power lies not in force, but in presenting desperation as opportunity. The money exchanged during this encounter is deliberately modest. It is not enough to change a life, but it is enough to sting. It reminds Gi that reward still exists somewhere, just out of reach. More importantly, it proves that the stranger's promises are real. The money is tangible. It can be held, spent, given away. In contrast, Gi long-term efforts have produced nothing but debt and apology. The game, at least on the surface, delivers results quickly and without judgment. The invitation reaches its true form not in the game itself, but in the card that follows. A simple piece of paper, cleanly designed, carrying a symbol and a phone number. No explanation, no persuasion, no pressure. The card does not demand action. It waits. This waiting transforms the invitation into something far more insidious. It follows Gi home. It sits in his pocket as he confronts the reality he tried to escape: family conflict, financial collapse, and the quiet understanding that nothing has changed. Here, Squid Game makes its argument clear. Choice cannot be separated from context. On paper, Gi is free to walk away. In practice, Every path available to him leads back to the same place. The invitation does not remove his agency, but it exploits the absence of meaningful alternatives. When all options are painful, the one that promises clarity, even at great cost, begins to feel reasonable. This is why the invitation resonates beyond the story itself. It reflects a broader truth about modern systems. Opportunities are often framed as choices, while the conditions that shape those choices remain invisible. People are told they are free, even as the cost of refusal grows unbearable. Squid Game does not suggest that Gi-hun is tricked. It suggests that he is cornered by circumstances that make consent increasingly hollow. When Gi-hun finally makes the call, it is not a moment of excitement. It is quiet, heavy, almost resigned. He is not saying yes to the game. He is saying no to the life that has given him nothing but loss. In that moment, the invitation completes its purpose. It reveals itself not as an offer, but as a mirror, reflecting a society where survival itself has been gamified. The choice was always presented as his own, yet the illusion lies in believing there was ever another one. The first game begins with confusion rather than fear. When the participants are guided into a vast, brightly colored space, the atmosphere feels almost playful. Oversized walls painted like a child's playground, a giant doll standing at the far end, and a set of rules nearly everyone recognizes. Red light, green light is a game learned before language fully forms, a ritual of childhood that relies on instinct rather than thought. At this moment, the players still believe they are part of an elaborate performance, something strange but ultimately harmless. The danger has not yet announced itself. The rules are explained in simple terms. Move when allowed. Stop when commanded. Cross the line to succeed. Nothing about the instructions suggests finality. Nothing prepares the players for what losing truly means. This deliberate understatement is crucial. Squid Game does not shock through exaggeration. It shocks through omission. By withholding the truth, the game allows expectation to do the work. People assume the punishment will be embarrassment, removal, perhaps disappointment. These assumptions are born from a lifetime of experiences where games end without lasting consequence. The moment the truth is revealed, it arrives without warning and without drama. One mistake is enough. One failure to stop is enough. The sound that follows does not feel real at first. The human mind resists understanding it. Panic spreads not because people immediately grasp the rules, but because they sense something irreversible has occurred. Confusion turns to terror as realization moves through the crowd faster than reason. This is the exact instant the game shifts from illusion to reality. From this point forward, nothing can be undone. What makes this scene so effective is not the event itself, but the reaction to it. People do not become heroes or villains instantly. They become human. Some freeze, paralyzed by disbelief. Some run, driven by instinct rather than logic. Others collapse, overwhelmed by fear. The game does not punish morality or reward cruelty. It exposes temperament. Those who survive do so not through strength or intelligence, but through emotional control. The ability to stand still, to breathe, to resist panic, becomes the defining skill. Seong Gi survives the first game not because he understands the system, but because he adapts. He learns by watching, by listening, by feeling the shift in the air. His survival is not triumphant, it is desperate. He moves forward while surrounded by chaos, guided by nothing more than the belief that stopping is safer than fleeing. This moment establishes a key truth about the series. Survival is not about dominance, it is about restraint. The world of Squid Game favors those who can suppress impulse, even when every instinct screams to escape. When the game finally ends, The space feels transformed. What once looked playful now feels hollow and cruel. The bright colors no longer soften the environment. They mock it. The contrast between the setting and what has occurred becomes unbearable. The players are no longer participants in a contest. They are witnesses to a system that does not care whether they understand it. The game has revealed its true nature. And with that revelation comes an unspoken contract. Now that the truth is known, remaining becomes a conscious act. This first game serves a purpose beyond elimination. It redefines reality for everyone involved. From this point forward, denial is no longer possible. The players have crossed a psychological threshold. They know what the cost of losing is, and they also know the reward continues to grow. This knowledge fractures the group. Fear does not unite them. It isolates them. Each person begins calculating distance, risk, and proximity to others. Trust becomes fragile. Survival becomes personal. Squid Game does not frame this moment as a descent into savagery. Instead, it presents it as an awakening. The truth is not that the game is cruel. The truth is that the game is honest. It reveals a world where consequences are absolute and mercy does not exist unless written into the rules. In doing so, it strips away the comforting lies people carry about fairness and safety. After the first game, no one can pretend they are still playing. They are simply trying to remain. After the first game ends, silence settles over the survivors like a heavy fog. The shock has not yet transformed into understanding, and understanding has not yet become acceptance. Faces are pale, eyes unfocused, minds still struggling to process what has just occurred. In this moment, the game does something unexpected. It pauses. The masked figures explain that participation is not mandatory. A vote is offered. If the majority chooses to leave, the game will end and everyone will be sent home. At first glance, this appears to be mercy. In truth, it is the most revealing test of all. The vote introduces an idea that feels comforting: freedom. The players are told they may walk away. No punishment, no pursuit, no hidden clause. The rules seem clear. Yet the atmosphere in the room is not relieved. It is conflicted. Fear pulls them in one direction. Memory pulls them in another. The horror of the game is undeniable, but so is the weight of the lives they left behind. Squid Game understands that freedom, when offered after trauma, does not feel like rescue. It feels like abandonment. When the decision is made and the game halts, the players return to the outside world. What follows is one of the quietest yet most devastating sections of the story. There is no spectacle, no dramatic music, no sense of triumph. Instead, reality resumes exactly where it left off. Debts remain unpaid. Families remain fractured. Illness does not pause. Shame does not disappear. The world outside the game welcomes no one back. It simply continues, indifferent and unforgiving. Seong Gi-hun's return is particularly telling. He steps back into his old life and realizes that nothing has changed except his awareness. He has seen death up close, and yet the pressures that drove him into the game still exist. His mother's health is failing. His relationship with his daughter is slipping away. Money remains the invisible wall between intention and action. Freedom, it turns out, has not saved him. It has merely returned him to the same slow suffocation he tried to escape. This is where Squid Game sharpens its critique. The series does not argue that the game is preferable to real life. It argues that for some people, the difference between the two is disturbingly small. Outside the arena, failure is quieter but just as destructive. People lose years instead of moments. Dignity erodes instead of bodies. The vote exposes a truth many would rather ignore. survival is not always about staying alive. Sometimes it is about enduring a life that offers no resolution. As the players individually confront their circumstances, the illusion of choice begins to unravel. The option to leave existed, but the conditions that shaped that decision were never equal. Those with safety nets, with time, with support, could afford to walk away. Those buried under obligation and desperation could not. Squid Game does not frame their return as weakness. It frames it as inevitability. When the cost of staying is death and the cost of leaving is slow erasure, the line between freedom and coercion blurs. When the players choose to return, the decision is not dramatic. It happens quietly, one by one, across different locations and circumstances. Each return feels personal, yet collectively, they form a pattern. The game does not need to hunt them down. It waits. It understands that desperation is a more reliable force than violence. The invitation becomes a refuge, not because it is safe, but because it is honest about what it demands. The vote, in retrospect, is not an act of mercy. It is proof of legitimacy. By allowing the players to leave, the game absolves itself of responsibility. Those who return do so knowingly. This knowledge does not make the system ethical, but it makes it efficient. The burden of choice is placed on the individual, while the structure that created the desperation remains untouched. Squid Game exposes how easily accountability can be shifted when consent is extracted under pressure. By the time the players step back into the arena, something fundamental has changed. They are no longer clinging to the belief that this is a nightmare they will soon wake from. They understand that the game is not separate from the world they came from. It is an extension of it. The vote teaches them that freedom without opportunity is not salvation. It is simply another way of being trapped. As the game resumes, a subtle but decisive shift takes place among the players. The chaos of the first revelation has passed, and raw panic begins to harden into calculation. Fear does not disappear, but it evolves. People stop asking whether the game is wrong and start asking how it works. This transition marks the true beginning of Squid Game, not as a spectacle of shock, but as a psychological experiment in human behavior under pressure. Survival now depends not only on individual instinct, but on the ability to navigate trust in an environment designed to corrode it. Alliances begin to form, quietly and cautiously. Players gravitate toward familiarity, strength, intelligence, or perceived usefulness. Trust, however, is no longer a moral decision. It becomes a strategy. Seong Gi gathers a small group around him, not because he plans to lead, but because cooperation feels like the only way to remain human. Within this fragile circle, each member brings something different: physical strength, intelligence, experience, or emotional grounding. On the surface, this group looks like a team. Beneath it, however, lies uncertainty that no one dares to speak aloud. The games that follow reward observation as much as action. Simple tasks reveal complex truths. Who hesitates before choosing? Who watches others instead of the rules? Who speaks too much? Who remains silent? Every movement becomes information. In this environment, kindness can be misread as weakness, while caution is mistaken for cruelty. The players begin to understand that survival does not always favor the loud or the strong, but those who can read the room without revealing themselves. Sang-woo embodies this realization more clearly than anyone else. Where Gi-hun reacts emotionally, Sang-woo calculates. He observes patterns, anticipates outcomes, and withholds information when it benefits him. This does not make him overtly cruel. In fact, his betrayal is rarely loud or dramatic. It is quiet, procedural, almost professional. He does not push others forward. He simply steps back at the right moment. Squid Game presents this contrast carefully, not to declare one approach correct, but to show how different forms of intelligence respond to the same pressure. Trust within the group begins to fracture not through violence, but through omission. Information becomes currency. Knowing the nature of a game before others can mean the difference between survival and elimination. The decision to share or withhold knowledge is no longer ethical. It is tactical. This is where the idea of betrayal becomes complex. Is it betrayal to protect oneself in a system that guarantees only one winner? Or is betrayal defined by intention rather than outcome? Squid Game refuses to answer these questions directly. Instead, it lets the audience sit with the discomfort. Ali represents the opposite extreme. His trust is open, sincere, and unguarded. He believes cooperation is inherently good, and loyalty will be rewarded. In a different world, this belief might have carried him far. In the arena, it becomes a liability. The tragedy of Ali is not that he lacks intelligence, but that he assumes others operate by the same moral framework he does. Squid Game does not punish him for kindness. It exposes the cost of assuming kindness will be reciprocated. The old man, player one, complicates trust even further. He appears vulnerable, detached from ambition, almost playful. His presence softens the group, reminding them of something beyond competition. Yet even here, uncertainty lingers. In a game where every participant has accepted the risk of death, vulnerability itself becomes suspect. Is it genuine, or is it another strategy? Squid Game understands that suspicion is contagious. Once introduced, it reshapes every interaction, even those grounded in empathy. As trust erodes, strategy takes its place. Players begin preparing not just for the next game, but for the behavior of others. They anticipate selfishness. They expect betrayal. This expectation, in turn, makes betrayal more likely. The system feeds on itself. By rewarding foresight and punishing hesitation, the game gradually transforms cooperation into a calculated risk rather than a shared value. Even moments of solidarity carry an unspoken expiration date. What makes this stage of the story so compelling is its restraint. Squid Game does not rely on dramatic confrontations or explicit treachery. Instead, it focuses on small decisions, quiet glances, and conversations that end just a second too early. The most damaging betrayals are not shouted. They are rationalized. They happen when someone chooses not to speak, not to warn, not to wait. In this silence, the game does its deepest work. By this point, the players are no longer reacting to the system. They are adapting to it. Trust becomes conditional. Strategy becomes instinct. Betrayal becomes a possibility everyone carries, including those who still believe in fairness. Squid Game shows that when survival is limited, morality does not disappear. It fragments. And in that fragmentation, people do not become monsters. They become negotiators, trading pieces of themselves for one more chance to remain. The marble game begins with a cruel misdirection. After rounds built on teamwork and fragile alliances, the players are instructed to form pairs, encouraged to stand beside the people they trust the most. Friends choose friends. Protectors choose the vulnerable. Bonds formed under pressure finally seem to matter. For a brief moment, there is relief. Cooperation feels rewarded. Only when the rules are revealed does the true nature of the game emerge. Each pair is not a team, but a confrontation. Only one person from each pair will move forward. Trust, once again, is turned into a weapon. What makes this game devastating is not its mechanics, but its intimacy. Marbles are small, familiar objects, associated with childhood play rather than competition or threat. The rules are flexible, allowing any game so long as one person ends with all the marbles. This freedom is deceptive. It places moral responsibility entirely on the players. There is no prescribed cruelty, no forced action. Every lie, every manipulation, every moment of hesitation belongs fully to the individual. The system does not dirty its hands. It watches. Seong Gi finds himself paired with the old man, player one, the person he least wanted to face. Their relationship has been built on care rather than calculation. Gi protected him, included him, treated him as a human being rather than a burden. Now, that very humanity becomes the obstacle. From the beginning, Gi struggles not with strategy, but with guilt. Winning means condemning someone who trusts him completely. Losing means his own end. The game offers no honorable outcome, only different forms of regret. As time passes, the old man's apparent confusion deepens. He forgets rules, wanders away, seems unaware of the stakes. Gi grows desperate. The pressure of the clock, the silence of the space, and the knowledge that others are making ruthless choices, all close in. In this moment, Squid Game exposes one of its darkest truths. Morality weakens under time limits. When survival is framed as urgency, principles become negotiable. Gi lies, not out of malice, but out of fear. His betrayal is quiet, almost gentle, wrapped in rationalization. He tells himself, there is no alternative. Elsewhere, the game unfolds in parallel tragedies. Ali faces Sang-woo, a man he trusts deeply, someone he believes will protect him. Sang-woo, cornered by probability and pride, chooses deception over honesty. He exploits Ali's innocence, replacing marbles with stones, winning not through force but through manipulation. This moment is not shocking because it is violent. It is shocking because it is calculated. Sang-woo understands the system completely. He knows the rules allow this outcome. He also knows that regret will come later, when survival is already secured. Sai-byok's match tells a different story. Paired with another woman who has little interest in winning, the game becomes a conversation rather than a contest. They share fragments of their lives, regrets, and quiet dreams. Here, Squid Game slows down. It allows space for tenderness, for choice that is not driven by calculation. When the final moment arrives, sacrifice replaces betrayal. One chooses to lose so the other may live. This act does not defy the system, but it briefly transcends it. In a game built to extract selfishness, this choice stands as an anomaly. The marble game does something no other round achieves so completely. It breaks the illusion that survival can be shared. Until now, players could pretend that everyone might make it through together. This game destroys that hope. It forces a direct reckoning. Someone must be chosen to fall. There is no randomness to blame, no physical advantage to hide behind. Only decisions remain. Squid Game does not ask who deserves to live. It asks who is willing to carry the weight of choosing. When the game ends, the survivors do not celebrate. There is no relief, only numbness. Victory feels hollow because it is soaked in memory. Those who move forward do so carrying invisible costs. Gi survives, but something essential fractures inside him. Sang-woo survives, but his methods draw him further from the person he once was. The marble game leaves no physical scars that can be seen, but it reshapes every character permanently. This is the point where Squid Game makes its most devastating statement. Survival, when reduced to a zero-sum equation, does not elevate the strong. It corrodes the kind. Betrayal here is not a twist. It is a requirement built into the structure. The game does not punish empathy directly. It simply makes it too expensive to keep. By the time the final stage arrives, the game no longer needs spectacle. There are no crowds of players, no frantic calculations, no illusion of fairness left to maintain. Only a small number remain, and with that reduction comes an unbearable clarity. The arena is stripped down, familiar in shape yet heavy with meaning. What once existed as a memory of childhood now stands as the last threshold between survival and surrender. The game has come full circle, returning to its origin, but the innocence that once defined it is gone. Seong Gi and Cho Sang-woo stand on opposite sides, not as rivals born in the arena, but as men shaped by a shared past. They grew up together, played together, and dreamed under the same sky. Their lives diverged, yet the weight of expectation followed them both. Sang-woo became the symbol of success, the one who escaped. Gi-hun became the example of failure, the one left behind. Now, stripped of titles and reputation, they face each other as equals in loss. The game does not create their conflict. It merely exposes what has been building for years. The final game is not introduced with complexity. Its rules echo those of childhood, simple enough to remember, brutal enough to endure. Movement is restricted. Boundaries are clear. One must attack. One must defend. Victory requires the fall of the other. There is no reward for cleverness now, no advantage gained through information. Only will, endurance, and choice remain. The simplicity is intentional. At this stage, the game is no longer testing intelligence. It is testing belief. What unfolds between Gi-hun and Sang-woo is not a battle fueled by hatred but by disappointment. Each represents a path the other might have taken. Gi-hun sees in Sang-woo the version of himself that society praised, yet now rejects. Sang-woo sees in Gi-hun the failure he feared becoming. Their conflict is personal, layered with resentment, guilt, and unspoken regret. The game becomes a physical expression of everything neither could articulate. Gi-hun fights with desperation, but also restraint. Even after everything he has witnessed, something inside him resists crossing a final line. Sang-woo, in contrast, moves with precision shaped by necessity. He has crossed too many lines already to hesitate now. For him, stopping would render every prior decision meaningless. The game reveals the cost of each philosophy. Compassion slows Gi-hun. Pragmatism isolates Sang-woo. Neither approach offers peace. As exhaustion sets in, the difference between the two men sharpens. Gi-hun is driven by connection, by the faces of those he has lost, by promises he never meant to break. Sang-woo is driven by consequence, by the belief that survival justifies all prior actions. The arena does not judge them. It simply narrows their options until only one remains. The tragedy lies not in the outcome, but in the realization that this confrontation was avoidable, shaped by pressures long before the game ever began. When the moment arrives where the game could end without further loss, Gi-hun makes a choice that defies the logic imposed on him. He chooses to stop, not to win, not to dominate. He invokes the rules that still allow refusal, even at the brink of victory. This decision is not framed as heroism. It is framed as refusal to become something he no longer recognizes. Gi-hun understands that survival without humanity would be another form of defeat. Sang-woo's response is quiet. In this silence, the series delivers one of its most painful truths. Some people cannot return from the choices they have made, even when given the chance. Sang-woo understands that leaving the game alive would mean living with what he has done. His final act is not one of triumph, but of acceptance. He chooses an ending he can control, sparing Gi-hun the burden of delivering it himself. The final game ends without celebration. There is no sense of victory, only absence. The space feels empty, not because the competition is over, but because something essential has been lost along the way. Brotherhood has been reduced to memory. Friendship has been sharpened into a blade, not by malice, but by a system that demanded it. Squid Game closes this chapter with restraint, allowing silence to speak louder than any declaration. In the end, the final game does not ask who deserved to win. It asks what winning costs, and whether anyone truly walks away intact. The game ends, but nothing resolves. Seong Gi steps back into the world carrying a prize large enough to erase every debt, yet too heavy to lift the weight inside him. The victory is undeniable in form, recorded, verified, and transferred into his hands. But emotionally it feels incomplete, almost unreal. The system delivers exactly what it promised, and in doing so reveals the hollowness of that promise. Winning does not restore what was lost. It merely confirms that loss was the price of entry. Gi-hun returns home expecting closure, or at least stillness. Instead, reality strikes with quiet cruelty. The people he fought to protect are gone, unreachable, frozen in memory. The house feels smaller, emptier, unchanged. The world does not greet him as a survivor. It does not ask what he endured. Outside the arena, there is no recognition, no ceremony, no acknowledgement that something irreversible has occurred. This indifference is perhaps the sharpest contrast of all. Inside the game, every action mattered. Outside, his suffering blends into the background noise of ordinary life. For a long time, Gi-hun does nothing. He avoids the money, avoids decisions, avoids movement. The prize sits untouched, not because he rejects it, but because he does not know how to integrate it into a life that no longer feels real. This paralysis is not weakness, it is grief. Squid Game resists the temptation to portray recovery as swift or empowering. Instead, it allows trauma to linger. Survival has not strengthened Gi-hun. It has hollowed him out, leaving behind questions with no clear answers. The story then shifts its focus, not toward revenge or triumph, but toward responsibility. Gi-hun begins to act, not as a victor, but as a witness. He remembers promises made under pressure, names spoken in confidence, sacrifices given without expectation of return. The money, once a symbol of escape, becomes a tool for restitution. He uses it not to elevate himself, but to stabilize the lives of those connected to the fallen. These actions are quiet and deliberate. They do not erase guilt, but they acknowledge it. In doing so, Gi-hun reclaims a fragment of agency lost within the game. The final revelation reframes everything. The truth behind the game surfaces not through spectacle, but through conversation. The architect of the system is not driven by hatred or ideology, but by boredom and detachment. Wealth, in excess, has drained meaning from experience. The game was never about justice, punishment, or even entertainment in the conventional sense. It was an experiment in control, designed to confirm a belief that people, when cornered, will always choose themselves. Gi-hun challenges this belief not with violence, but with refusal. He refuses to accept that desperation defines humanity. He refuses to believe that suffering erases compassion entirely. This confrontation is not a victory in any traditional sense. There is no dismantling of the system, no public reckoning, but there is resistance. For the first time, Gi-hun is not reacting to circumstances. He is asserting a moral position, grounded not in innocence, but in experience. The final moments of the story do not offer comfort. They offer direction. Gi-hun stands at another threshold, once again presented with a choice. This time, the illusion is gone. He understands the cost of involvement and the cost of turning away. His decision to confront the game rather than flee from it completes his transformation. He is no longer a man chasing relief. He is a man willing to endure discomfort for the sake of others. Victory, in Squid Game, is deliberately redefined. It is not measured by survival alone, nor by wealth accumulated. True victory is the refusal to normalize cruelty, even after benefiting from it. Gi-hun does not emerge unbroken, enlightened, or absolved. He emerges aware, and awareness, in a system built on apathy, becomes a threat. Squid Game ends without peace because peace would suggest resolution. Instead, it leaves the audience with a lingering unease, a reminder that the conditions which created the game still exist beyond the screen. Gi-hun's journey closes not with certainty, but with purpose. He has survived a system designed to strip people of meaning, and in choosing to push back, he affirms the one thing the game could not fully erase. Humanity, even when wounded, is not so easily extinguished.